Imagine a man who lived on this earth for 41 years but never saw a light bulb. He never heard the roar of a car engine. He didn't know what a clock, money, or a calendar was. But the most incredible thing is, he didn't even know that women existed. To him, humanity consisted of only two people, himself and his aging father. This is not a Hollywood movie script or an ancient legend. This is a reality that existed in our modern world, deep in the impenetrable jungles of Vietnam, right up until 2013. While we built the internet, launched smartphones, and changed governments, this man climbed trees like a primate and wore clothes made from tree bark. His name was Ho Van Lang. The world christened him the real-life Tarzan. But his story is not a Disney fairy tale. It is a tragedy of a war that refused to end. It is a story of a mad fatherly love that built a prison out of green leaves. And it is a story of how the modern world, in trying to save the savage, ultimately killed him. To understand how a man can vanish from time, we must return to one of the darkest periods of the 20th century. 1972, Vietnam. The height of a war that tore the country apart. The sky over Quang Ngai province was black with smoke, and the ground shook from the endless strikes of American bombers. In the small village of Tra Kem lived a man named Ho Van Tan. He was an ordinary farmer, a husband, and a father. He had a wife and 4 children. He loved his simple life, cultivating rice and enjoying quiet evenings with his family. But war spares no one. On one fateful day, Ho Van Tan's world ceased to exist. An American bomber dropped its deadly payload directly onto their village. The blast wave wiped his home off the face of the earth. In a single instant, Tan lost his wife and 2 of his children. When the dust settled, Tan, shell-shocked and maddened by grief, found his 1-year-old son, Lang, alive among the debris. The boy had miraculously survived. Tan clutched the child to his chest. Something snapped in his mind. The shock was so profound that he made a decision that would change their destinies forever. He decided that the world of men was hell. That death fell from the sky, and the only way to survive was to run where no one would find them. Grabbing little Lang in his arms, Tan ran toward the dense, dark green forest. He took no food, no tools, only his son and his fear. He ran further and further, hacking through vines, climbing mountains, going into depths where even local hunters feared to tread. He was running from the war. He didn't know the war would end in 3 years. For him, it would last forever. Thus began their isolation. Father and son dissolved into the green abyss. The first months were a struggle for survival on the brink of death. A city man would have perished there in a week. But Tan was driven by paranoia and the instinct to protect. He learned to speak the language of the jungle. They found shelter not on the ground, where snakes crawl and tigers roam, but in the sky. Tan built a hut at the top of a massive tree, 5 meters above the ground. It was a nest woven from bamboo and rattan, a fortress inaccessible to predators. Years passed. Little Lang grew up knowing no other world but the forest. To him, the jungle wasn't scary. It was his playground, his school, and his home. He learned to walk on branches like a monkey and distinguish hundreds of forest sounds. Their diet was the diet of prehistoric men. They ate whatever they could find or catch. Fruits, roots, wild honey. But their main source of protein was hunting. Lang became a master of traps. They ate rats, snakes, lizards, frogs, and bats. To Lang, the tastiest delicacy was a rat's head. He later said that rat meat tasted better than chicken. They ate their prey whole, often not even separating the skin and bones. In the jungle, you can't be picky if you want to survive. The clothes they arrived in rotted away within months in the humid tropical climate. Tan recalled the ancient skills of his ancestors. They began making clothes from tree bark. They soaked the bark in a stream, beat it with stones until it became soft, and wove it into loincloths and capes to protect themselves from cold nights and insects. But the most amazing thing was how they created tools. Tan hadn't forgotten the war. He found fragments of bombs and crashed planes rusting in the jungle. From the deadly metal, he forged knives, axes, and arrowheads. He used stones as hammers. The weapon that destroyed his life was now helping them survive. Ho Van Ton, the father, was growing old. His mind was still stuck in 1972. He raised his son in strict isolation. He told Lang that a terrible war was raging outside the forest, that people were evil, and if they ever saw a person in colored clothes, they must run and hide. Lang grew up believing this implicitly. He feared people, the same way we fear monsters under the bed. Once they saw people from afar, a group of loggers in bright jackets. Father and son fled in terror deeper into the thicket, hiding in bushes and holding their breath until the monsters left. But the most shocking aspect of Lang's upbringing was the absence of women. Ton never told his son about the existence of the female sex. Lang knew there was Papa, and there was him. He didn't know where children came from. To him, the concept of a mother, sister, or wife was as alien as the concept of an extraterrestrial. Lang's psychology was unique. He was a man with the body of an athlete, capable of killing a wild boar with his bare hands, but with the mind of an innocent child. He had no concept of time, as we understand it. He didn't know what hours, minutes, or years were. He lived by the sun. He rose with the dawn and slept with the sunset. He had no desires common to modern man. He didn't want power, didn't want money, didn't feel envy. He didn't even have words for many feelings. When he was later asked if he was bored in the forest, he didn't understand the question. How can one be bored when there is so much life around? 41 years of silence. 41 years of rain. Ton turned into a decrepit old man with a long white beard resembling moss. Lang turned into a 40-year-old man who moved faster than the wind. It seemed they would die there, becoming part of the legends of this forest. But fate had other plans. In 2013, two locals from a neighboring village went deeper into the forest than usual looking for firewood and agarwood. Making their way through the undergrowth, they noticed something strange, smoke rising above the trees in a place where no one should be living. They approached closer and saw an incredible sight. On the bank of a stream, two men dressed in bark were butchering a python with a stone knife. One was very old, the other incredibly muscular and wild. Fearing they had met forest spirits, the peasants ran away and alerted the authorities. Rumors reached a man named Ho Van Tri. This was Ton's second son. The one who, on the day of the bombing in 1972, was just a baby but survived because he wasn't home. Tri grew up with his uncle, knowing his father and brother were lost in the woods. All these years, Tri hadn't lost hope. He had heard legends of wild men. And so, in August 2013, he organized an expedition. Together with a group of rescuers and police, they headed deep into the jungle, trekking kilometers off-road. The search took 5 hours. Finally, they surrounded the treehouse. Lang noticed them first. His reaction was instant and furious. He grabbed a makeshift spear, ready to defend his father from the monsters in colored clothes. Ho Van Tri stepped forward. He raised his hands and shouted. He called out to his father. Ton, who was now 82 years old, was too weak to run. He looked out of the hut, his eyes clouded. Hearing a familiar name, hearing a voice that sounded like voices from a past life, he froze. It was a moment of incredible tension. Lang, wild and strong, could have killed any of them. But he saw his father's reaction. Ton lowered his head and wept. The war in his mind had finally ended. Lang, seeing his father not resisting, lowered his spear. The rescuers cautiously approached them. They saw the life of these Robinsons, sets of stone tools, stocks of dried rat meat, clothes made of bark, baskets woven with incredible skill. It was a Stone Age museum existing in the 21st century. The evacuation felt more like a kidnapping to Lang. His father, too weak to walk, was put in a hammock and carried. Lang walked alongside, his hands tied just in case, his eyes darting around in panic. He was leaving the only home he had ever known. When they emerged from the forest and approached the village, Lang experienced a culture shock of a magnitude we cannot imagine. The first thing he saw was a truck. A huge, growling metal beast. Lang pressed himself to the ground in terror, covering his ears. They were brought to a medical center. Doctors examined them. Surprisingly, they were physically healthy, though malnourished. Lang saw an electric light bulb for the first time. He stared at it for hours, mesmerized, not understanding how the sun could burn inside a small glass ball. But the biggest discovery for Lang was women. Nurses worked at the hospital. Lang looked at them with genuine bewilderment. Who were these people with soft voices and strange shapes? It was explained to him that these were women. That children are born from them. Lang listened to this like a fairy tale. He later said, "Father never told me about this." For a 42-year-old virgin raised in the forest, the concept of gender was abstract. He felt no attraction, only the curiosity of a child seeing a new animal. The process of adaptation began. Father and son were housed in the home of their relative, Ho Van Tri. Lang had to learn everything from scratch. He was given ordinary clothes, a t-shirt and shorts. At first, he constantly tried to take them off. They felt uncomfortable and stifling compared to his loincloth. Food became another challenge. All his life he ate bland, natural food without salt, sugar, or spices. Modern food, rice with sauces, fried meat, sweets, seemed like an explosion of flavor to him. He loved it, not knowing it would be the beginning of his end. The world around him was noisy and chaotic. Lang was afraid to cross the road. He feared buffaloes because in the forest they were wild enemies, but here they obediently pulled plows. He didn't understand the concept of money. If he needed something, he just wanted to take it. But despite his wildness, Lang possessed an amazingly gentle character. Researcher Alvaro Cerezo, who lived with him for a week in the jungle after his return, called him a superhuman with the soul of a child. Cerezo recounted, "Lang doesn't know what lying is. He has no filter. If he is happy, he laughs. If sad, he cries. He is perhaps the purest human being I have ever met." Lang didn't understand the concepts of good and evil because in his world, evil simply didn't exist. However, the father, Ho Van Tan, never accepted the new world. His mind remained in the jungle. He sat in the corner of the room, staring at the forest in the distance, and often asked his son, "Let's go back. It's not safe here." The old man died in 2017, 4 years after being rescued, never believing the war was over. The death of his father was a terrible blow to Lang. Tan was his universe, his god, and his only friend. Lang was left alone in a world of people he didn't fully understand. Lang tried to fit in. He learned to work a little on the farm. He learned to use a phone, though with difficulty. He became a local celebrity. Tourists came to take pictures with Tarzan. They poured him rice wine, offered him cigarettes. And here lies the tragedy. Lang's body, accustomed to the crystal-clear water of streams and dietary rat meat, was not ready for the toxins of civilization. He started drinking alcohol. He started smoking. He ate fatty food. His immune system, perfectly tuned for the jungle, proved powerless against the bacteria and viruses of modern society. What was normal for us was poison for him. Friends noticed that Lang's gaze became increasingly sad. He often went to the edge of the village and looked at the mountains. He told his brother, "It's noisy down here. It's quiet in the forest. I want to go back." But he promised his father to look after his brother and stayed. In November 2020, Lang felt pain in his chest and abdomen. At first, he endured it, as he was used to enduring pain in the forest. When he finally went to the doctors, the diagnosis was terrible: liver cancer. The final stage. Doctors said the cause was the drastic change in lifestyle. Alcohol, processed food, the stress of noise, and the new reality. The civilization that saved him from the harsh life in the jungle was now killing him from the inside. Lang's final months were agonizing. The man of steel, who could climb trees like a monkey, withered before everyone's eyes. Relatives gathered around his bed. Alvaro Cerezo flew in to say goodbye to his friend. Cerezo recorded a video of Lang's final days. In this footage, we do not see the powerful savage found in 2013. We see an emaciated, exhausted man in hospital pajamas, looking longingly out the window. Ho Van Lang died on September 6, 2021. He was 52 years old. He lived in civilization for only 8 years. 8 years that cost him his life. His story sparks fierce debates. Did we save him? Or did we destroy a unique world in which he was happy? In the jungle, he had no electricity, but he had freedom. He had no medicine, but he didn't have cancer. He had no money, but he never went hungry. He didn't know women, but he also didn't know heartbreak, betrayal, or lies. He was living proof that a human needs very little to be happy. When asked what he missed most from life in the forest, he answered simply, silence. Lang was buried next to his father. The whole village gathered for his funeral. People cried, saying goodbye to Tarzan. But many understood, his spirit never left those mountains. Imagine for a moment his life. Waking up to the singing of birds, in a hut at the top of a tree, breathing in the clean mist air. Hunting with a spear made by his father's hands. Falling asleep looking at the stars, not knowing that somewhere there are mortgages, wars, and the internet. To us, his life seems like a hell of deprivation. To him, our life was a hell of noise. The story of Ho Van Lang is a mirror for us all. We pride ourselves on our progress. We consider ourselves the pinnacle of evolution. But when we met a man who lived as our ancestors did 10,000 years ago, we saw in him not savagery, but a purity we have lost. He took with him to the grave secrets of survival that modern science has forgotten. He knew the properties of every plant. He knew the language of the beasts. He was the last man of nature. Today, the treehouse in the forests of Tay Tra has likely rotted and collapsed. The jungle quickly reclaims its own. The paths trodden by Lang are overgrown with vines. The forest has erased the traces of their existence. But the story remains. The story of a boy who fell from the sky into a green ocean. Of a father's love that stole a son from the world to save him. And of a tragic return that proved that sometimes being found is more dangerous than being lost. Now, as you sit in front of your screen in the comfort of your home, think of Lang. Of his first night in the jungle. Of his first encounter with a car. Of his last breath in a hospital room. We call him Tarzan, trying to fit him into our fairy tales. But he was more real than any fairy tale. He was Ho Van Lang. A man who lived 2 lives, one lasting 41 years in paradise, and another lasting 8 years in our world. And the question remains open, in which of them was he truly alive? Perhaps the real tragedy is not that they were lost, but that we found them. The archive closes the file of Ho Van Lang. But the echo of his life continues to sound in the noise of the wind over the Vietnamese mountains. If you ever find yourself in a forest, stop and listen. Turn off your phone. Forget about time. Try to hear that silence that Lang loved so much. This was a story from the archive. A story of how easy it is to get lost and how hard it is to return. We often fear oblivion. We fear disappearing. But Ho Van Lang showed us that in oblivion, there can be peace. Thank you for opening this chapter with us. Every like and comment helps us find new stories and keep them from vanishing forever.